What makes for good business? We'll talk about one of those principles today on the Gary Demar Show. What makes for good business? Hello, I'm Joel McDurmon, filling in for Gary Demar here on the Gary Demar Show today. Thank you for joining me. Service, that's what makes for good business, and I would like to talk about that principle in relation to some anecdotes, and particularly falling back on Scripture, of course. This comes from the 20th chapter of Matthew, a story many of you are familiar with, and beginning in the 20th verse, the mother of Zebedee's children with her sons, worshiping him, that is Jesus, and desiring a certain thing of him. And he said unto her, What wilt thou? I'm reading from the King James, by the way. And she said unto him, Grant that these my two sons may sit on your right hand and on your left in the kingdom. Of course, Jesus says this is not possible. And skipping down a bit to verse 24. And when the 10 heard it, they were moved with indignation against the two brethren. But Jesus called them unto him and said, You know that the princes of the Gentiles exercise dominion over them, and that they that are great exercise authority upon them. But it shall not be so among you, but whosoever will be great among you, let him be your minister, that is, servant. And whosoever will be chief among you, let him be your servant. Even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many. Of course, this applies to your personal life. This applies to your business life. It applies to government. It applies to everything in life. The principle of giving and being a servant always supersedes, as far as morals and ethics goes, always supersedes and makes for a better society than any kind of domineering or tyranny or lording it over people. Why do I bring this up? I'd like to tell you a couple of stories in relation to business and why this principle is so effective and so necessary. Just about a year and a half ago or so, I bought a new house, and in the financing process, the guy who was the loan agent gave me some promises over the phone. He works for, of course, one of the largest banks, if not the largest bank in the country, and the largest home lender, and I won't name them, but they're not too hard to find out who that is. He made me some promises, word of mouth. I got the documentation. He said, yeah, everything's what we talked about. Go ahead and sign it. Foolish of me not to sit down and read it line by line, but I was wanting to buy a house. I trusted the guy, and I looked at most of the important things, and it seemed to be all right there. But there were two things I was trying to avoid. I was trying to avoid a loan in which I had to pay mortgage interest, because that increases your payment $60 to $70 a month, and it doesn't show up on the front end. And there were a couple other things. So I talked to him, and he said, yeah, you're going to have to pay a little mortgage insurance, but that's okay because you can refinance in 6 months, and you won't have to worry about that. That'll go away. I said, well, that's exactly what I want to do. Let's do it. So we did it. Well, come 2 days before time to close, I said, well, I'm glad this is working out this way, and I'll call you back in about 6 months when I'm ready to refinance. And he said, oh, no, not with this type of loan. This type of loan will take you have to pay the mortgage interest for at least, I think it was 3 years, it might have been 5 years, before you can refinance. And I said, wait a minute, that's not what we talked about before. And he said, well, if you go back, look at the paperwork I sent you, it's in there. And so the whole thing was about not trusting what the guy told me up front, not being able to trust what the guy told me up front versus what the papers said. Now, of course, it falls on me. It's 100% my responsibility. Nevertheless, when you're doing business with someone and they tell you something up front, you should be able to trust that. That whole issue aside, I had a problem. I raised a big deal about it with this guy, and I was not happy. I let him hear it, and I didn't have real. If I backed out, I would have lost the house completely because there were other people waiting in line to buy it. I had 2 days, so I really had to go along with it. And I told the guy, I said, look, you lied to me. I want it made right. And he he tried and weasel out of it every way possible, but I had the emails where he said what he said, etc. And in the end, he really didn't make good on it at all. And the difference would have been, if I would have played this out over 5 years, would have been several $1,000s. Of course, paid over several months. And he wouldn't take care of it at all. Okay, that is bad business. It's technically legal on his side, but it's just bad business. He made a mistake, he made an error, he lied, and he would not take care of the problem. So, long story short, the first good chance I got to refinance with another company, I did so, and I did that just this spring, actually, a few months ago. I got a much lower rate, got rid of the mortgage interest problem, and have a payment that's $150 or so less than what I was paying before. And in doing so, I said, look, I know you're a small finance company. You're going to send this mortgage out to be serviced by somebody else. I said, I want to explicitly request that it not go to this other bank. Okay, now what is my whole point in this? This guy, when I confronted him, he would not make right on it, and he tried to convince me that I was actually getting a good deal doing what he said. But I said, all right, I'll tell you what, as soon as I get the chance, I'm pulling my business from you guys. And because of his bad business, I not only will not go back to him, but I pulled my business and went to another bank to refinance. And in the long run, that cost his bank probably, if you look at the service charges for the interest in the loan over 30 years, you're probably looking at $150,000 or $60,000. So his bad business up front of not willing to take a hit for $200 or $300 on his part cost his bank $160,000 in the long run. And I'm very happy to point that out to him, because I say that is bad business. Now let me give you another story. Just the other day, a much smaller, more insignificant matter, my wife and I and our kids went after church to a local reputable donut establishment, and we made an order. The kids behind that were behind the counter taking care of it, they got it all wrong. They forgot about it, so I had to go back and ask, "Where's my order?" And they scrambled around and said, "Whoops, we forgot." And the manager heard about this, and he was very upset with them. And he comes out and he makes sure that I get it very quickly. And then I get in, I sit down and open up, and it's wrong. So I take it back and I said, look, this is supposed to have sausage on this sandwich, blah, blah, blah. And I said, look, I'm not trying to get anything out of you. Just refund me the difference between the two sandwiches. And so he did, and you could tell he was very embarrassed. And so I'm sitting there eating, and here he comes walking over with a handful of a complete another sandwich with sausage on it. And then he comes and starts trying to give me free donuts and all kinds of other things. And I said, look, no, I don't need all that stuff. But nevertheless, I did keep the other sandwich. But nevertheless, that is good business. The guy made a mistake. It was under his watch, and he made good on it. Okay. Instead of trying to defend himself, defend his company, extract every dime he could from the situation and save himself, he knew that in the long run it was better to sacrifice a little bit to appease the customer, to give good service, and those are the things that lead to return customers. I will go back to that guy. I will go back where I know that if something goes wrong, his attitude toward business is to serve and to take the risk out of it for me. That's good business. This is exactly what Jesus is talking about. Of course, he's talking about in your private life. It certainly applies to business. And really, it is the principle of business if you think about it. What is business after all? It is not just trying to make money. It is finding ways to serve and help humanity, help your fellow man, and to provide them goods and services, as we call it, in a way to help. And that is the long run. That's the principle Jesus talks about. It's how to have good business. And in the long run, it's better for both sides because it helps the people. And when they come back to the people who are doing good business, it helps the business grow. So that's a basic principle, service and not lordship. Thank you for joining me today on the Gary Demar Show.
For more related to today's topic, check out Protecting Your Wealth from Liberal Fallacies, featuring Joel McDurmon. You will find it at AmericanVision.com.